late 1990s, Robert, a night shift security guard at an old, decommissioned hospital in the outskirts of Chicago, experienced something he couldn't explain. The hospital had been closed for years, and Robert's job was to make sure no one entered the building after hours. One night, while doing his rounds, he heard strange footsteps echoing through the empty hallways. He brushed it off as his imagination until he saw something in the corner of his eye, a figure standing in a doorway. Thinking it was just another person trying to sneak into the building, he approached the figure, but as he got closer, the figure vanished into thin air. Robert was shaken, but what happened next left him speechless. Later that night, while walking through the dimly lit basement, he heard a voice call out to him, "Help me." Startled, Robert turned around, but no one was there. He rushed out of the basement, his heart pounding. The next day, he learned that the hospital had a dark history. A nurse had died in the very same basement years ago, and it was rumored that her spirit still roamed the halls. Robert never returned to that hospital, and to this day, the old building stands empty, haunted by the restless spirit of the nurse. Sarah, a night shift worker at a large warehouse in Texas, never believed in ghosts. That was until she experienced something that changed her perspective forever. It was a quiet evening, and Sarah was working alone, restocking shelves in one of the farthest corners of the warehouse. She was used to the sound of creaking metal shelves and the occasional hiss of the air conditioning, but on that night, something was different. As she turned the corner to retrieve more items, she caught a glimpse of something moving at the far end of the aisle. At first, she thought it was a fellow worker, but when she approached, there was no one there. Confused, she returned to her task, only to see the same shadowy figure move again. This time, she hurried to follow it, but as she reached the end of the aisle, it disappeared. Nervous and unsettled, Sarah called her co-worker, asking if anyone was there. He assured her she was alone. The following night, the shadow reappeared, but this time, it was clearer. A dark figure that stood in the middle of the aisle, its head lowered as if it was watching her. Sarah ran to the security office and played back the footage. To her horror, the camera showed no one in the aisle, yet the shadow was clearly visible in the video. The warehouse was built on land once used for burial grounds, and Sarah's experiences became one of many eerie occurrences that continued to plague the workers. Jack worked the night shift at a 24-hour convenience store in a small town in Kentucky. It was a quiet job for the most part, with only a few customers coming in during the night, but one particular evening, Jack had an unsettling experience that would stay with him forever. It was around 3 a.m. when he decided to take a quick break and use the restroom. As he entered the store's small, dimly lit restroom, he felt an odd chill in the air, though the rest of the store was warm. He dismissed it as the cold draft from the old ventilation system. However, as Jack stood by the sink, washing his hands, he heard a faint tapping sound coming from behind him. He turned around, but the room was empty. The tapping continued, getting louder and faster, as though someone was knocking on the walls. Jack quickly turned off the tap and scanned the room, but no one was there. At that moment, he saw something in the mirror, a figure standing behind him, just out of reach. He spun around in shock, but the room was empty. Jack's heart raced as he realized that no one could have entered the restroom without him noticing. After his shift, Jack researched the history of the store and discovered that the land it sat on was the site of an old tavern where a mysterious death had occurred. The ghostly presence in the restroom, it seemed, was the Restless, spirit of a former tavern owner who had tragically died there. Jack never returned to the restroom alone again.